Hello all, welcome to this video from Chaturmanas. In this video, we are going to learn how to create our first Windows EC2 on AWS. To do that, I should have an AWS account and I have already logged into my AWS account. EC2 is mentioned here. This is the service in which you're going to create the first EC2. Before even choosing the EC2, you must ensure that you are in a specific region of AWS in which you are going to create an EC2. So this is a long list of all the regions that are supported by AWS today. And this particular EC2, Windows EC2, we are going to create in Mumbai. So I have already chosen the Mumbai region. Once you have chosen the region, it will directly come into your EC2 dashboard, your EC2 services, wherein it will take you to the EC2 dashboard. In the dashboard, as you can see that it will show the number of running instances, the dedicated host, the volumes and key pace, the placements groups and everything that you have created in this particular region from the EC2 services. So currently we don't have anything. So we will try to launch a new EC2 in this particular region. To do that, you can scroll down and you can click on launch instance, or you can also go to instances and you have an option to create an EC2 from there. Either you can click here or you can click here. When I click here, the first step to create an EC2 is to choose an AMI. AMI stands for an Amazon Machine Image. Amazon Machine Image is an installable version of an operating system that can be installed on the EC2s that you choose from AWS. So in the step number 1, you choose an AMI. As you can see, in terms of AMI, AWS provides a long list of default AMIs which are available for all the users. So you have Amazon Linux, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, you have SUSE Linux, you have Ubuntu Server, you have as well Microsoft Windows Server starting from 2008 till 2019. So you have various options, and within the AMI, within this long list of AMIs, you can see that certain AMIs have been listed as free tier eligibility and certain operating systems or certain AMIs have not been mentioned as free tier eligibility. So you may be aware that AWS provides a free tier eligibility for all the users who have created a new account in the AWS. As part of the free tier eligibility, you are eligible to run an EC2 with a defined operating system for 750 hours a month, and this will continue to run for 12 months. Okay, so this is what is called as a free tier eligibility, and for this particular demo, let's try to choose something that is part of the free tier so that we don't get unnecessary billing for the operating system. To do that, what we need to do is we can choose the one that is part of the free tier. So if you want to just list out only the free tier based AMIs, then you can choose a checkbox here which is free tier only, and you can see that it lists only the free tier now. Now in this particular free tier you have Windows 2012, R2 and all that is supported. So I'm looking for Windows 2012, and if you want to look for a specific operating system you can search here as well. And in the AWS marketplace you have the Windows 2012 R2 is available. So this particular Windows Server initially was available by default there, but nowadays they have moved it to a marketplace, so you can choose there. So when you choose that, you can see that it is still part of the free tier eligibility. It means you will not be charged for this particular operating system license. So let's choose this and say select. Before that, let me explain a little more about these AMIs. There can be three kinds of AMIs. One is called as the AMIs which have been provided by AWS. The second type of AMIs is the marketplace, where the different vendors have come out with their own softwares and they have provided as AMIs. If I just click on AWS marketplace and if I don't choose anything, you can see that you have a CentOS, we have WordPress, then deep learning, then you have Red Hat Enterprise Manager, and all that has been defined as part of the AMIs. There are also people in the community, in the AWS community, who develops the AMIs and upload onto this particular repository. You can also use them. Most of the AMIs which are provided as part of the community AMIs are free of cost. You can go ahead and use that, but please ensure that you have chosen the right AMIs. In our requirement for this particular example, let's go to Windows 2012 AMI. Sorry, Windows 2012 R2 is the AMI that we are looking for. Let's choose that. So when you choose the Windows Server 2012 R2 AMI, because it is from marketplace, though it is written as free tier eligibility, it will still show you what are the charges if you take this operating system on different EC2 types. As you can see that the different EC2 types has different charges. But anyway, we don't need to worry because we are going to launch it in the T2 Micro, which is part of our free tier. So please rest assured that we are not going to be get charged for this particular instance that we are creating now. So I'll just say continue. This is only for the information. I'll just say continue, and then it will ask us to choose the instance type. In terms of instance type, there are 5 different kinds of the instances that you can choose. One is called as a general purpose, compute optimized, GPU instances, memory optimized, and storage optimized. The general purposes are the normal servers. Compute optimized are the compute optimized to be used for the applications which are very compute intensive applications, which requires more cores of CPU and a very high power computing power. GPUs for graphical processing units, which requires for certain gaming applications and all. Then you have memory optimized to be used for all the applications which are memory intensive applications. Storage optimized is for the applications which are storage intensive applications. So depending on your requirement, you can choose the respective instance type. So I choose general purpose here, and only the general purposes will be listed down. If I choose the compute optimize, only the compute optimize will be listed down here. So what I do is I choose the all instances type, and when I choose the all instances type, all the instances types will be listed down here. Out of all these things, there is only one particular service that is called as a free tier eligibility, which is nothing but T2 micro. So T2 micro is a 1 vCPU and 1 memory, 1 GB memory server. This particular T2 micro is part of the free tier. Whenever you create a new AWS account, this T2 micro, you can run it for 750 hours a month at no cost at all. Okay, so I'm going to choose this T2 micro, and I'll say next, configure instant details. Step number 3 has a lot of options for you to go and define what kind of servers and how you want to spin up this particular EC2. The first thing that you will choose is the number of instances. By default it is 1, and if you make it 10, then 10 alike instances will be created. Then you have a purchasing option wherein you can choose a spot instance. Spot is a very special way of purchasing an EC2 on AWS, wherein you can go and bid for the unutilized hardware from AWS, and if your bid value is more than others and if the hardware is available, you will get that particular server for your bid value. Then you can choose a network. So there is a default VPC that has been already created by AWS, and which we are going to use it for our demo. If you have your own VPC, then that particular VPC will be created. So we have another video wherein we are showing how to create this VPC and how to choose that. So please refer to that particular video on creating the VPC and management of it. Now for this particular demo, I will continue with the default VPC, and then in terms of a subnet, it will display the number of availability zones and the different subnets that we have. As you may be aware that Mumbai has three availability zones: AP South 1A, 1C and 1B. Okay, either you can say no preference, where AWS will choose based on its logic and create in one of the availability zone, or if you are very specific that you want it in a specific availability zone, then you can go ahead and choose that. Now I'll go ahead and choose in 1A. Then there is a auto assignment to public IP. So this basically tells that whether you really want an public IP address to be associated to this EC2 or not. Then you have a placement group. So placement group is a setting wherein you want to define the number of EC2s networkly close by, and that particular setting you do especially when you are doing the EC2 configurations in a cluster, like a SQL cluster or any other application cluster that you want to build. Okay, you have another configuration called as the capacity reservation. In the capacity reservation, you define upfront to AWS stating these are the number of servers and this is the number of capacity that I would like to use for next 1 year from this particular availability zone. This also gives a business predictability to AWS, and they will ensure that that amount of hardware is available for you to go and create on this particular availability zone. For a testing servers, like couple of servers, you really don't require to do any of such settings. Then you have a domain name join directory. So this is a new service that has been launched, and this is applicable only to the Linux Windows servers. In terms of Windows servers, you can have an active directory, and that particular you can make this Windows servers join that particular uh, domain domain directory. Then you have an IAM role. IAM role is a role that need to be created in an IAM service of AWS. This role helps you to define what privileges does is this EC2 has on the other services of AWS. For example, you want to access an S3 bucket from this particular EC2, so you can define a role uh, to this particular EC2, and it will have all the privileges to go and access that. There is a shutdown behavior of stop and terminate. So when you click on that particular EC2 and when you say stop, what should happen? Is it should stop that particular instance and keep it in a shutdown mode, or should terminate that? That's what the behavior is. By default it is stop, so let's go ahead with that. And then you have an enable protection enable termination protection. So please checkbox this, click it checked during your production server environment. It's very important to keep it enabled. The reason is, so many times it so happens that by mistake you go and click on particular EC2 and you go and terminate that. In AWS, when you terminate a particular EC2, you cannot get that EC2 back. And luckily, if you have retained its EBS volumes, then you will get it back. Otherwise, even the EBS volumes will also be get deleted. So by mistake, you should not delete your production environment, and that's the reason why you should keep it on. However, this setting can also be changed after the launch of the EC2 as well. So for now, I will go ahead with the default setting. Monitoring, by default, all the EC2s that you are creating in AWS will be automatically enabled for the monitoring, and that particular monitoring is called as a default monitoring. This default monitoring will poll the server for every 5 minutes. When you enable this detailed monitoring will be done. The polling cycle of the detailed monitoring is every 1 minute. If you want to really monitor that particular server, which is a production environment, then you can enable this detailed monitoring. Otherwise, the default monitoring of 5 minutes polling is anyway enabled on all the EC2s. Then you have a tenancy. Tenancy is the thing, but how you want to take the hardware service from AWS. Either you can make your virtual machines launch on an available hardware on AWS, which might also been shared with other people in the environment, and that service is called as a shared service. In this particular shared service, your virtual machine may be co-hosted with other virtual machines from anyone on the same hardware. But just in case for the compliance perspective or from a other security perspective, if you really want a dedicated hardware wherein you want to ensure that all the EC2s that has been created by your organization to be hosted on a particular hardware and which is not shared with any other vendors of any other clients of AWS, then you'll have to choose a dedicated one, and that particular is called as a tenancy. Then you have a T2 and T3 unlimited. The general purpose EC2 are bustable in nature, and T2 and T3 unlimited specifies to what level the performance of these EC2s to be able to burst during the during the non-utilization of the other VMs running on that particular hardware. Then the setting that we have is a network interface, and currently there is a one interface card that has been attached to this particular EC2. If you really wish to add the second network interface, you can go ahead and do that as well. Okay. Then you have an advanced details. In the case of advanced details, you have a metadata information as well as the user data that you can provide as part of this particular EC2. So step number 3 has a lot of configurations that can be made, but by default all the configurations are set. So unless and until if you are very specific that you want to change it, you don't need to change anything. For example, for this particular EC2, which is going to be our test EC2 on Windows, we are not going to change anything. We just leave everything the default parameters, and we'll just continue as is. I'll click on next, add storage, and we have a storage option here. There are three kinds of volumes which are available, and this particular storage is nothing but the elastic block storage. Elastic block storage is the block storage that can be used on EC2 to have it as a root volume. For example, in Windows Server, you see that it's a C drive, D drive, E drive. So all these different drives that we have will come from this particular storage itself, and it's called as elastic block storage, EBS. Okay, there are three kinds of types that are available in AWS. One is called as the general purpose SSD. You can choose that, and its IOPS is 100 and maximum to 3000. It means 100 is the minimum, and it can burst till 3000 during the non-peak utilization of on that particular hardware. Then if you really want a specific IOPS, then you can go for a provisioned IOPS, which is 1500. I can increase it to whatever the IOPS that is required for me. For example, you want to take a EC2 for an Oracle instance, then probably you would like to have a dedicated IOPS like this. In that case, you can go for a provisioned IOPS. Then the third one is a magnetic. You can go for a magnetic, and maybe for a dev test environment, or probably just for a normal server, you can go for a magnetic. The default one is a general purpose SSD. You can also encrypt the data that has been created. Sorry, on this particular block storage, you can also encrypt the data and you can keep it. The default behavior is that it's not going to encrypt any data. Delete on termination is very important. As I told you that once the EC2 is terminated, you won't get that EC2 back. But this particular storage can be retained even after the EC2 is terminated by just unchecking it. If I uncheck this and if I delete or if I terminate this particular EC2, this volume or this particular EBS is going to retain as is in AWS, which we can attach to another server and we can access the data. Okay, so this is a very important configuration. If you want to add the further devices, like for example, you want to add the D drive or the E drive, so you can keep adding the volumes. Note that the entire free tier eligibility for an AWS account is 30 GB per region, and since you already consumed the 30 GB, so if you add one more volume of even 1 GB, that 1 GB is going to be chargeable to you. Okay, so I just skip this. I just leave it with the default configuration, and I will continue with the tags. I'll just click on tags, and tags plays very important role in terms of AWS services utilization. There are 50 tags that can be added. Okay, the tags will help you to give a user defined identification to a to an EC2 or any of the services on AWS. Okay, the default tag that you have is called as a name tag, wherein you would like to define a name to this particular EC2. So I would like to call it as first Windows server. And if you want to add the further tags, you can click add another tag and you can keep increasing. For example, I can add another tag and I can say that project, and I can say that it is an EC2 demo. So like this, I can add as many as 50 tags to each of the EC2 instance. So I'll just continue the security group. Security groups are the important aspect as part of your implementation of uh, uh, EC2 launch. Security groups are nothing but it's a firewall, firewall which protects your EC2s. So let me just go back to the slide deck and let me just explain how the fire security groups works. So you as an end user, whenever you want to access an EC2, you have to pass through the network. That's a VPC, and each VPC will have the security groups. So you can define as many as security groups as you want. Okay, depending on your requirement. For example, in this particular example, I have an Ubuntu EC2, Red Hat, as well as Windows. Each EC2 must be associated with a security group, or I would say that every EC2 should have a security group associated with that. You cannot launch an EC2 without a security group. However, one EC2 can be connected with two security groups. So in the case of a Red Hat, as you can see that it SG1, that's a security group 1, as well as security group, both are associated with this. So this is also possible. Okay, so Ubuntu 1 has only one security group, Red Hat has two security groups, and Windows has one security group. So there is security groups are operating system independent. I can have a single security group associated with all the EC2s as well. Okay, so depending on your requirement, you create the firewall rules. In the firewall rules, you define what port numbers to be opened or blocked from this particular EC2. Security groups works only for the incoming traffic. By default, by default your EC2s are allowed to communicate to the external world. However, when you have an input request to this EC2, it will pass through the security group. So this is what the security group, and this particular security group already has an HTTP and RDP open. RDP is a protocol used by Windows to do a remote login. So what we will, it's always a good practice that you have a single or only few security groups, and you connect the same thing to your different EC2s. It is not a good practice to have a long list of security groups, and you probably tend to miss out certain ports and open it unnecessarily for the others. So what I'm going to do is, let's create this new security group and I will call it as Windows SG, and I will give a description as well saying that this is created during demo online, or I'll say online demo. Okay, and I do not want HTTP to this, I'll just close it. If you really RDP is by default allowed, and if you say add rule, you have a list of all the different ports those are available, as you can see. You can also write custom TCP rule and you can define your port number. Okay, so we are not going to add this. I'll close this, and then finally I'll say review and launch, and then it will give the summary of all the configuration that you have chosen for this particular EC2, and I'll say launch. When you say launch, it will ask you to create a key pair. Key pair is the another level of authentication that is allowed on all the EC2s. This particular key pair works in a different way for Linux machines and Windows machines. In the case of Linux machine, these key pairs, that is these key pairs are nothing but the public key and the private key. So these key pairs, public key and the private key, on Linux machine are used every time you connect, you take a remote session of that Linux machine using an SSH. In the case of Windows, these keys are used only to retrieve the passwords of a Windows administrator server. By default, you will not have any key pairs, you will have to create one, and you'll have to say create new key pair, and you can create one. The key pair name can be anything, but please ensure that the key pair is unique, and you have mentioned, and it is quite recognizable by you when you keep it on one of the local disk. So I will give it as EC2 key pair, and I'll say download EC2 Windows key. I'll just say it as EC2 key pair, and I'll say download key pair. So it's very important that you have to download this key pair, and this particular key pair, it will download the private key file of this particular key pair. So this public key is going to be residing on the AWS, and this private key is what you have downloaded. So I'll just go to that particular folder, which is in the download folder, and as you can see that this key pair is already downloaded here. I'll just copy this, and I will keep it in a folder, in a proper folder. Okay, and then I will continue say launch instance, and continue with my instance, and it will take some time to display what is happening. It says initializing launches now. And finally we got this launch status. So you'll also get an ID. This is an EC2 ID. When I click on this, it will take me to the instances page, and where it will show me what is the status of that. So this was pretty fast, and you can see that even less than a minute it turned into a running state. The status check is an initializing. It is still checking what is happening on the hypervisor and hardware, whether they are in a healthy condition to run this particular virtual machine. But your Windows server is already in a running state. As you can also see that it is in availability zone 1A. This is what we had chosen. This is of the type T2 micro. And in the description below, you can see that it also has a public IP address. It also has the private IP address to be communicated within AWS environment. So the one way that you can do is, there are different ways how I connect to this particular server. But before that, let's understand what is the username and the password of this particular Windows server. Okay, most of the Windows servers, or every Windows server, comes with a default username called as an administrator, that everyone is aware. But how do you retrieve the password? Okay, to retrieve the password, or to get the password that has been created for this particular EC2, you can click on that server, go to actions, and say get Windows password. Okay, and you remember that we created this particular PEM file. So this particular PEM file will be used and will be authenticated before we to retrieve the password of this particular Windows server. So I'll choose a file, and I will go to the folder where we have stored that particular PEM file. I will choose this, and I'll say open, and I'll say decrypt password. Okay, and here is a password. I'll just copy this, and I will store it on a notepad. Okay, and I'll close this. Okay, then we got our username, and we got our password as well. Let's try to connect it. To connect that, the one way that you can do is, you can go to your start, and you can type MSTSC, which will open up your remote desktop connection. Okay, this is one way of doing it. The second way of doing it is, you can say connect, and you can download the remote desktop file. Okay, so either one of the way you can connect to this particular server, and I have a habit of going to run, opening this MSTSC, and then saying connect to this. So before connect, let me just go and change certain settings of this, and I'll just make it as a default MSTSC for this particular demo. Yeah, I'm in a remote desktop connection, and as you can see that the username that it has taken is administrator, and you can give the computer name or the IP address of this particular server. So yeah, I can choose either this public DNS name, or you can choose this IP address. I'll just copy it and paste it here. And if I just click on the show details, it will also ask you what is the username. Those people who are running their laptop, they and those laptops which are connected to your company domain, they will also by default will have their company domain, and then slash something will come. It will pick up from your local laptop. So what I suggest is you remove everything and you just give it as an administrator. Okay, so this particular EC2 windows that we have created is not part of your domain. So when you try to simply authenticate, it will try to take the username from your laptop and try to connect, and it will not be able to connect. Okay, so please ensure that you are just chosen username to that, and I'll say connect. And if your firewall ports and everything is open, then you'll be able to connect to that. Okay, if you're trying this particular exercise from your company, please ensure that the RDP port is open. Most of the companies do not open the port SSH and RDP outside to their organization. So please ensure that you have appropriate ports open for you to go and connect to this. So now it is asking for a password, and I'll just go and copy my password and paste it, and I'll say okay. uh, some problem, let me just, is it the same? Yeah, I'll say okay. uh, let me correct it, guys. I'll pause the video and let me just go and retrieve the password again and see what has happened. Yeah, welcome guys. I just figured out the spelling of this administrator was wrong, that's why it was not taking the password. Now I have keyed in again the administrator. So now I will go and paste this password, and it should work. Yeah, there we go. Now it is asking for the security. We don't have any certificate. I'll just click yes, and I will continue. And as you can see that we have successfully done the RDP to this particular server. So it will take a couple of minutes to initially set up all the initial configurations. So we'll just have to leave it for a couple of minutes and see. So I'll just pause this video for a minute here, and once it is done, I will come back. They come back, guys, and you see that we are successfully able to log into this particular Windows, and it has done all the initial setup of this particular Windows, and the desktop is handed over to us. So we can go and do all the settings that we really want to do in this particular Windows server. Okay, so I'll just close this now. I'll just close this connection, and uh, I'll just close this connection and come back to this particular AWS console wherein it is still showing running. So let's see how we close this particular server after our usage. So just go and close it. So go to actions, and you have an instance state here. You can stop it. I mean, you can keep it in a shutdown state, or you can reboot it if you really want this particular server to be rebooted after a patch update or something like that, or you can terminate it. So I already explained to the status. Stop means you just keep it in a stop mode, in a shutdown mode. Okay, the server will not be running, it is in a stop mode. But whereas when you terminate, okay, this particular server will be get terminated and permanently deleted from your AWS account. You will never be able to retrieve back this particular EC2. So before terminating, please ensure that you ensure that the server that you are terminating is really that the one that you want to terminate. By mistake, you don't terminate enough your production environment. So I'm going to terminate this, and it will ask me for a confirmation, and I'll say yes, terminate, and it will take a couple of minutes to terminate this particular server. Yeah, as you can see that the server got terminated now. There is no information available associated to this particular server. Even if I go to the actions, I'll not be able to do anything with this particular server, because this server or this particular EC2 got terminated from the AWS account. Okay, so that's it, guys, for this particular demo. And in this particular demo, you have learned how to create a Windows server, how to log into that particular Windows server, how to retrieve the password of the administrator account of that particular Windows server, and then finally terminate the Windows server. Okay, so please subscribe to our channel Chatrumanas, and you'll be keep receiving such educational videos from our side. Thank you once again, and have a nice day.